It started like most Saturdays in rural Alabama. Slow, quiet, and sweet. The dew still clung to the blades of grass like nature's way of stretching. The sun had just begun to peek over the pine trees, and I had a steaming mug of black coffee in one hand. My golden retriever, Scout, was curled up at my feet on the porch, his ears twitching at the occasional birdsong. I was wearing my old USMC hoodie, the fabric worn and familiar, and the porch steps were still damp from the morning's breath. I wasn't expecting visitors, least of all one that looked like she'd walked off a reality show called Suburban Tyrants. She came stomping down the sidewalk, a clipboard clutched tightly under one arm, massive sunglasses hiding whatever soul might be behind them, and that haircut, short, angular, and screaming of HOA wars won and lost. Her pink blazer glared against the soft tones of the morning. I didn't recognize her. That didn't stop her from marching straight up my driveway, clicking her heels like a high school vice principal on a mission. "You need to get off the porch. This is not your property," she screeched, her finger trembling as she pointed at me like she was about to cast a hex. Her voice cut through the birdsong like a chainsaw in church. I hadn't even swallowed my first sip of coffee. I blinked, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I built this porch. With my own 2 hands. In fact, the lumberyard still sends me holiday coupons." She didn't even hesitate. "This is a common-use community entry point. You're in violation of HOA Ordinance 12B. No loitering in shared zones." I stared at her for a solid 10 seconds before answering. "Ma'am, I'm a Marine. I've sat on sandbags in 130-degree heat with bullets flying over my head. I assure you, if I choose to sit on my own front porch and drink coffee, I am not loitering, I am living." But she didn't back down. Not even a blink. This woman had the conviction of someone who'd never been told no in her life, or at least, never listened to it. Scout let out a low growl. He knew nonsense when he heard it too. "Step off this porch," she said, voice rising. "You are non-compliant. I'm issuing a verbal notice of removal." I stood up slowly, not because I was intimidated, but because I knew I had to stay calm. The last thing I wanted was for this woman to spin a fairy tale to the police about an aggressive homeowner. Still, the ridiculousness of it all settled over me like fog. "Ordinance 12B?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," she said, clicking her pen like it was a loaded weapon. "Part of the community enhancement restrictions. This area is designated as a shared zone." "Shared by whom?" "Me and my dog." Her eyes narrowed behind those comically large sunglasses. "As interim president of the Transitional HOA Board, I have authority to enforce compliance." There it was, the power trip. A made-up ordinance, a made-up position, and a whole lot of misplaced confidence. I tried to keep a straight face as she thrust a piece of paper toward me. It looked like it had been printed at a public library, Comic Sans font and all. A clip-art gavel adorned the top corner like it was designed by a third grader. I took the paper and gave it a once-over. It was less official than a grocery store receipt. Phrases like mandatory decorum and unauthorized porch usage were sprinkled between clip-art borders of little houses. It was like someone had Googled how to HOA and then winged it with a PowerPoint. "This," I said, handing it back, "isn't worth the paper it's printed on. There is no HOA here." She puffed up like a cat in a thunderstorm. "We are forming one. It's in the transitional phase. This property is subject to future compliance review." "Future compliance doesn't mean present authority," I replied, taking another sip of coffee. "You can't enforce rules from an organization that doesn't exist yet." Her lips tightened, and she stepped closer, a little too close. "This attitude is exactly why we need order." Scout rose to his feet, standing beside me now. Just his presence was enough to make her take half a step back. That's when she went for the nuclear option, at least in her mind. "You are being verbally removed from this location," she said, raising her voice for what she probably thought was dramatic effect. "You have 10 seconds to comply, or I will contact the compliance officer." I looked down at Scout. He looked up at me. "Scout," I said, "you hear that? We're under removal notice." He wagged his tail, oblivious or possibly amused. I turned back to her. "This is my property. You're the one who needs to leave. You're trespassing, and I'm giving you 10 seconds to step off before I call the sheriff." Her eyes gleamed with something like victory. "Oh, please do," she said, whipping out her phone. "In fact, I'll save you the trouble." She dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Greg," she said, "we've got an emergency. The male is refusing to vacate the entry porch. I need HOA enforcement at Lot 17 now." A gruff voice replied, "On my way." She looked back at me triumphantly. "Certified compliance officer. You're in big trouble now." I just smiled and pulled out my phone. If she wanted backup, I had some of my own. I opened the group chat titled USMC, the old guard, and typed one sentence. "Some nut is trying to evict me from my own porch. Feel like dropping by?" Then I sat back down, took another sip of coffee, and waited for the fun to begin. By noon, the quiet calm of my Saturday had transformed into something that felt like the opening act of a very dramatic, albeit comical, soap opera. I stepped out to get my mail and was met with a bizarre sight: flyers. Dozens of them. Taped to lampposts, trash bins, mailboxes, and even a few unfortunate windshields. All had bold red text that screamed, "Emergency HOA meeting, community violation at Lot 17. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo of me, sitting on my own porch, coffee in hand, my dog Scout snoozing at my feet like a poster child for suburban tranquility. I stood there, chewing gum and trying not to choke on it from laughing. The photo looked like it had been snapped with a potato. The colors were off, my face was a blurry smudge, and Scout looked like a furry beanbag. It had the aesthetic of a late-night infomercial on neighborhood anarchy. Kerren had clearly spent the night printing these out on her prehistoric inkjet printer, declaring war in 12-point Comic Sans. I gathered a handful of flyers and returned to the porch where Jack, still leaning on the railing like it was his shift post, took one glance and let out a low whistle. "She's gone full dictator with Microsoft Word," he said. Just as we were sharing a laugh over the absurdity of the flyer, a familiar rattle echoed down the street. A beat-up sedan, still bearing a "for sale" sign in the window, clunked into view. Out stepped Greg, the self-proclaimed compliance officer Karen had summoned the day before. He was dressed like someone who had been rejected from 3 different Halloween stores: reflective vest, khaki cargo pants, and a faded cap that said "Security" in peeling letters. He walked with the exaggerated swagger of someone who'd just been handed fake authority and took it way too seriously. "Sir," he began, voice projecting like he was addressing a room full of criminals, "you've been officially flagged for non-compliance with the Homeowners Association Civic Guidelines, Section 3.2T, regarding porch occupation and visual uniformity." I blinked. "Did you just say visual uniformity?" "Yes, sir. This porch," he paused, waving a hand like a home design critic, "does not comply with community harmony aesthetics." Jack nearly choked on his coffee. "You insultin' a Marine's porch design, son?" he asked, stepping forward. "Let me see some ID." Greg hesitated, reached into his vest, and pulled out a laminated card. Jack inspected it. It was a gym membership, with Greg's name scribbled in marker on the back. "He's serious," Jack said, shaking his head and passing it back. I stepped up next. "Unless you're about to hand me a violation from the Department of Make-Believe, I suggest you and your clipboard shuffle back to that rolling lemon of a car before I call actual authorities." Greg looked back at Karen, who was filming from across the street, muttered something about documentation, and then awkwardly retreated to his sedan, which stalled twice before coughing to life and sputtering away. I figured that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Roughly 30 minutes later, 2 county police cruisers pulled up. Lights on, sirens silent. Karen ran out to them like a contestant meeting her favorite boy band, her phone still rolling video. She was practically shouting. "There's a group of unauthorized males in military attire unlawfully occupying public space." The officers, cool and professional, approached the porch. I stood up, greeted them calmly, and explained everything. Jack produced his sheriff's badge. And then, as if the universe couldn't have planned it better, the second officer tilted his head and grinned. "Corporal Gaines?" he asked. I did a double take. "Ryan." It was Ryan, another Marine from my unit. We hadn't seen each other in years, but the handshake quickly turned into a full embrace. We shared a quick moment before Ryan turned to his partner, conferred briefly, and both walked over to Karen. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I saw the shift in Karen's face. It was like watching a balloon deflate in slow motion. Her voice dropped to a confused mumble. Her camera lowered. And finally, she stepped back, stunned. Ryan returned to the porch and clapped me on the back. "You sure know how to pick a neighborhood," he said. I laughed. It picked me. That night, the situation kept gnawing at me. Something Ryan said stuck. She really thinks she has power, doesn't she? So I poured myself a glass of bourbon, pulled out my laptop, and started digging. Property records, zoning maps, council minutes, neighborhood petitions, you name it. What I found didn't just explain Karen's madness, it lit a floodlight on her motives. The HOA she referenced didn't exist. There had been a petition filed 2 months ago to form one, with Karen listed as acting president. But the county had rejected it, flat out. No approval, no legal standing, no recognition. What's more, she didn't even own her house. She was a tenant. Not just any tenant, one with 3 noise complaints, a permit dispute, and a pending civil suit for unauthorized community beautification. This wasn't about porch violations or neighborhood harmony. This was about power. Karen wanted to rule by illusion, to intimidate and fabricate until others submitted. She was building a kingdom of paper flyers and bluster. But she'd made one big mistake. She picked the wrong porch. Sunday morning started with the usual sounds: birds chirping, coffee brewing, scouts snoring at my feet. Then came the hammering. I stepped outside, cup in hand, and saw her. Karen, in a purple visor and a t-shirt that read, "President, Founding HOA Committee," was driving wooden stakes into the ground near the sidewalk. Curious, I wandered closer. She glared at me and raised a hand like she was directing traffic. "This is a restricted zone now," she said. "Eh, what?" "We're implementing territorial zoning for shared-use porch regions and pedestrian welcome areas. Your porch has been marked a conflict zone. It's under reassignment." I looked at the stakes. Red tape tied between them like a middle school science project. A laminated flyer fluttered in the breeze, another one of her homemade decrees. "You realize this is imaginary, right?" I said. "You're building pretend borders on land that doesn't belong to you." She smirked. "As acting president of the pending HOA, I have the authority to make preliminary designations. You can't integrate what you don't own." But she turned and walked back to her house, clipboard swinging like a queen returning from battle. That was the final straw. I sent a new message to the Marine Corps group chat. "Operation Porch Shield is a go. Assemble." Within the hour, the cavalry arrived. First came Mike, federal investigator, carrying a box of donuts. Then Tyler, cybersecurity expert, arrived with a drone and tripod. Finally, Evan, former medic, now a military police officer, showed up in uniform with a folding chair. We lined the porch like it was a VFW tailgate. Tyler launched the drone to film Karen's sad little staked-off conflict zone. Scout even wore a bandana. Karen stormed out again, fuming. "You can't gather like this without HOA clearance," she shouted. "You're making the neighbors feel unsafe." "Which neighbors?" I asked. "The ones who waved and brought muffins, or the ones laughing at your flyers on Facebook?" Her face turned crimson. "You're staging a military intimidation tactic. This is coercion." Mike stood, opened a folder. "You've issued fraudulent notices, trespassed, impersonated authority, and violated state impersonation laws." By Monday morning, the situation had moved online. Karen had taken her crusade to the neighborhood Facebook group, posting long rants about military squatters, accusing me and my friends of staging a coup against the rightful HOA leadership, a title she bestowed upon herself, of course. Her posts were riddled with typos, wild claims, and blurry screenshots of our porch hangout, one of which included a donut mid-air as Jack tried to toss it to Scout. It backfired magnificently. Within an hour, the post had over 200 comments, most of them laughing emojis, popcorn gifs, and neighbors openly mocking her flyers. Some residents started sharing stories about Karen's antics, yelling at kids for riding bikes too fast, measuring grass length with a ruler, and filing complaints over wind chimes being too spiritually aggressive. A new nickname emerged: General Karen. Someone photoshopped her face onto a Civil War general's body holding a clipboard like a saber. She tried to delete the post, but by then it was screenshotted, shared, and immortalized. Her digital siege had backfired harder than her paper flyers ever could. What Karen hadn't expected was that her behavior would unite the neighborhood, in exactly the opposite way she intended. That same afternoon, several neighbors who'd been quietly enduring her behavior stopped by my porch to say thanks. One woman brought cookies. Another brought her husband, a retired judge, who glanced at the laminated boundary post and chuckled, "That's cute." He explained how none of her notices held legal merit, and even offered to help me file a formal complaint. Word spread quickly. Someone organized a block-wide potluck for Friday and called it Freedom from Fiction Day. People were fed up. Karen had been a splinter in the neighborhood's foot for years, but now she'd gone too far, and the Marines on my porch were just the spark everyone needed. Despite the humor, we knew Karen could be dangerous in her own way. So Mike, the federal investigator, helped me draft a full report documenting everything: flyers, false notices, impersonation, trespassing, and her fake compliance officer Greg. We submitted it to the county and the sheriff's office. Tyler gathered drone footage and timestamps. Evan added a medical perspective in case she tried to claim emotional distress or stage some incident. We weren't trying to hurt her, we just wanted it to stop. But if it didn't, we were ready. Meanwhile, I printed a giant, private property, NO soliciting, sign and mounted it above the porch. Beneath it, I taped a copy of Karen's fake flyer with a red stamp that read, "Denied by reality." Scout barked proudly when I hung it. The next day, someone from down the street dropped off a lawn sign that read, "Protected by Marines and Common Sense." It stayed there all week. By Wednesday, Karen was unraveling. She hadn't posted on Facebook since the firestorm, but she had taken to walking up and down the street like a sentry, visor low, sunglasses on, muttering to herself. That morning, she knocked on my door. Not stomped. Not shouted. Knocked. I opened it to find her standing there, clipboard-less, arms folded. "You win," she said quietly. But then she added, "For now," and walked away. It wasn't over. Not in her mind. I could see it in her eyes. But the wind had left her sails. The neighborhood had turned. Her fake authority collapsed. And the porch, it became a symbol. A gathering place. A shared joke. A reminder that one determined person backed by truth, and a few Marines, could stop even the most ridiculous power grab. Friday's potluck was legendary. Grills were fired up, coolers rolled out, and kids chalked "Porch Strong" across driveways. One neighbor brought a speaker and played "Fortunate Son." Scout wore a bandana with a little American flag on it. Karen didn't show. Her blinds stayed closed. But nobody missed her. People swapped Karen stories, shared laughs, and took turns sitting on the infamous porch like it was a local landmark. A photographer from the local paper even came by after hearing about the HOA that never was. He snapped a shot of the whole crew, veterans, neighbors, even Jack in uniform, posed casually with coffee and smiles. The article ran with the headline, "Front Porch Freedom, How a Fake HOA Sparked Real Unity." Karen may have tried to take control, but in the end, all she did was remind everyone what community really meant. Respect, humor, resilience, and the power of a porch.